there's probably no one person that's going to want to do all the things in bed that you want to do. And like in my case, the old size problem comes up. Okay, this one lady I knew, the only way that she was really comfortable fucking was with her on top. Whenever I was on top, she was just really uncomfortable. This other lady, she was really comfortable in that position, the missionary position, but we could never do it dog style. Somehow, it just didn't fit right. She wasn't comfortable and could hardly enjoy it. And I couldn't get off on putting her through pain. With either one of those women, there's a limit to what you can do. Okay, and this comes down to the thing in general about women and fucking. As usual, you have those extremes. Some women do not want to be penetrated. I mean, they don't want nothing going inside their body. They have really strong emotional reactions to that kind of thing. And when somebody like me comes along, where penetration is not just a casual affair, like having a baby in reverse, not quite that bad. That accentuates the problem. Okay, that's one extreme. And then you got the other extreme that I ran into one night at the Sutro. I'm sitting in the jacuzzi, and I see this lady walk in. I can see her locker from where I'm sitting in the jacuzzi, and she takes off her clothes, and man, this is a nice-looking lady. I mean, nice tits, and body, athletic, nice face. So, not wasting any time, I stepped out of the jacuzzi, half-dried myself off, and walked over and says, "Hey, would you like to smoke a joint?" And she says, "No, thanks." And I says, "Well, is there anything else that I can do for you?" And she says, "I don't think so." And I says, "Okay, well, you have fun. I'll see you later." She says, "Okay." So I go back and I sit back down in the jacuzzi. The lady putters around and she comes over and she gets in the jacuzzi, and there's a couple other people in there. So I figure I'm not getting no ass. I might as well be friendly anyway. What the hell? I smile at her. I say, "My name's Norm. What's your name?" And she tells me, and I says, "Well, why do you like to come here anyway?" And she says, "Well, I come here to get laid." And I said, "Well, I'd love to lay you." And she says, "Well, you got a room?" And I said, "Yeah." I don't know what happened in the meantime, between the time I got rejected and the time I got accepted or what, but we go to my room, or was it her room? Her room, I guess. I forget. This lady was great. She loved to fuck. Me on top, her on top. This room had mirrors, and I'm lying on my back. She's on her knees on top of me, sitting straight up, just bouncing up and down forever. She just loved it. We'd fuck and fuck and fuck, and I'd eat her, and I gave her my best head and so forth. Yeah, we're talking about it, as a matter of fact. She says, "I intimidated a lot of men." I says, "How's that?" "Because I like to fuck." She says, "It seems like most of the girls they meet don't really like to fuck." And I said, "Yeah." I says, "I run across that a lot." She was real perceptive. She says, "Is that why you give it such good head?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think probably." But one thing, if you're with somebody that, okay, you've got the two extremes. You got the kind that hate to fuck and the kind that love to fuck. And in between, you've got a lot of women that never have orgasm as a result of intercourse. It just doesn't hit them in the right place. It may feel okay. Sometimes it feels pretty good, and other times it's just pretty indifferent. But it doesn't really get them off, and they're really not into it that much, just for itself. So they have to have some kind of incentive. Why should they bother, really? If you make them feel good, if you make them feel better than they've ever felt before, they want to make you feel good. If getting up there and jamming that thing in them is what makes you feel good, then they're happy to do it, and they'll even try to make it feel good for you just because you made them feel so good. That might sound pretty, well, sort of a manipulative approach or a kind of a bartering situation, but I think really pretty much that's the way human relationships work. You do this for me and I do that for you, and people don't like to think of it in those terms necessarily, but I've heard other people beside myself put it pretty much that way, like he does nice things for me and I do nice things for him. That's one reason, fellas. That might be your major impetus right there for learning to give good head. A lot of guys resent it. Like this one guy I know, he says, well, the first time I give them head, and he said the second time, if they don't ask for it, he said, I don't give it, I just go ahead and fuck them. It's like, guys sense that the girl doesn't want to fuck, doesn't want him up there bouncing on him. So the guy feels rejected. He feels like, okay, here's a part of me that's pretty important to me. It's one of my major sources of gratification. And this girl could care less. As far as she's concerned, it's a piece of junk, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She doesn't want you sticking it in her body, and she's not for sure you sticking it in her mouth. Because, well, a lot of girls have that attitude because, hey, guys have never gotten them off. And it's unfortunate. It's amazing how many girls have lived a fairly reasonable age and never been gotten off by a guy just because, oh, there's a lot of reasons. The reasons they didn't tell them a lot of times is this thing about the male ego, and if you say, hey, I'm not enjoying this, he feels rejected. You run into all these emotional hassles and everything, and just to avoid them, they act like they're having a good time. Of course, sexual revolution and everything, maybe that's not as common as it used to be, but it still happens a lot. I still hear about it a lot from people. It's unfortunate. It's just damned unfortunate that it happens to be that way, but it's like water running downhill. If the girl's never had good experiences, she's never gotten off by having a guy stick a dick in her, she doesn't have much motivation, and how can you argue with that? How can you say, well, hey, this girl's fucked up? She's never had any reward for doing this kind of stuff. Even women that have had good sexual relationships with men, the guy's been concerned and interested, and he got her off, either with his hand or his mouth. And so, like, she's been happy with sex, and she's had a reward for participating, and it still doesn't necessarily make it any more fun to get pumped. So, that's a big thing about giving good head, is that you can't feel rejected if the girl doesn't want to reciprocate, or if she doesn't want to fuck. I had this one friend for years. She was sort of a friend of a friend. She's pretty. She's beautiful. The kind of a guy I am is, I like to see a beautiful woman come. To see her have fun. To see her get off. I think a beautiful body is beautiful in repose, or playing tennis, or moving any kind of thing. And a beautiful body moving under the influences of sexual stimulation is something that's just a beautiful sight to me. And I told this girl, hey, I'd love to give you some head, get you off sometime. I said, it doesn't have to be any complicated, heavy affair or anything, because I knew this girl wasn't interested in any kind of emotional relationship with me. She had a good emotional relationship. Well, I didn't really have anything to offer along that line, but like I said, I would like to see her get off. She was a neat enough lady. She was cool enough that she could consider it. And after she thought about it a while, she stopped him one day just on her way from here to there, just to say hi and maybe smoke a joint. And I says, well, just pull those pants down right now. Here, let me help you. Let me just get you off. You only got a few minutes here, but I can get you off in 5 or 10 minutes, I'm sure. And she giggled, but she kicked back and let me take her pants off, and I gave her some head and got her off, and it was good. She sat up, and I helped her pull her pants back up again, and she snapped, and she says, well, I gotta go to the store, whatever, and she's out the door. Over a period of a year, this happened maybe, 4 or 5 times, one time or another, odd time. A lot of guys would feel like, hey man, I'm getting ripped off, I'm getting this bitch off, and she's not doing anything for me. If you feel that way about it, like say if I demanded, I say, well, I'll give you some head if you let me fuck you. Then she would have said no. And I wouldn't have had the fun of, well, I don't know, to me it's fun for somebody to let you do that. To feel loose enough and comfortable enough with you that they can take off their clothes in front of you and let you play with their private part. It made me feel good that she felt that relaxed with me. Hey, that in itself, and like I say, seeing a beautiful body come, that was fun. Hey, I know how to masturbate. If I got any tension left over after she leaves, I can get a measure of release, and then I know other girls that are interested, that have the time or are into fucking and everything. They're always happy to see me, or they are often enough anyway, so I don't have to demand anything of this girl. And so what happened, of course, is one day she had the time, and she felt close to me, and she wanted to make me feel good. She knew she was making me feel good already, but she wanted to give me more. She wanted to give me something nice. And, oh, I can't tell you how wonderful it was. That same lady, I've known her for years now. She's gone through a lot of changes, and I've gone through a lot of changes, but still, when we see each other, it's kind of a magic thing. Something happened. I didn't see her for a long time. And she had this boyfriend for a while. They lived together. That was into technique, into women having technique. He made her practice these exercises to gain control of the vaginal muscle. And when they were fucking, he would give her commands as they were fucking, like contract, relax. He'd tell her when to contract, when to relax, and how tight, and so forth. And so he had just he just engineered the perfect fuck for himself. See, it was a treat for me too, man, because she'd practiced with this guy. She'd gotten tuned in to his rhythm. Of course, everybody doesn't have the same rhythm, but once you sort of understand how rhythm works and you get tuned into one person's rhythm, it's not that hard to adapt to somebody else's. Ladies, if you do run across somebody that you do like and you would like to do something nice for them, there are ways you can improve your technical performance. Well, I'm sure that'll come up again. Here it is again, technique. What should you do? How can you make it better? Well, of course, there's always the usual range of extremes. From the guy's point of view, the guy that likes it really slow and easy, to the guy that likes to bounce up and down and pound, see how hard he can jam it home, and how fast. From the woman's point of view, it works the same way. There's ladies that like it really nice and easy and don't get too hectic with them ever. There's other ladies that like it as rough as you can get, and everything in between. You can never predict if you don't know what a person is going to like. Trying to accommodate two different people's preferences, there has to be some give and take, of course. I tell you how it usually is. If I'm with a girl that I know is not really heavily into fucking, she doesn't really get off on the sensation of intercourse. She's mainly into getting head or something else more directly clitoral. Her vagina just doesn't have that much sensitivity. Then I figured they're being nice to me. Well, I mean, that's nice and I appreciate it. And at the same time, I don't want to try their patience or their energy. So I concentrate on getting off fairly quickly. I don't try to draw it out and savor the different textures and sensations at different angles and speeds and so forth. There's ladies that are like that as far as what they like, that are into fucking. Some of them just want it thick and fast and right now, don't fool around with preliminaries, just get on me and drive till I come. That's fun, but of course it's not everything there is that you can do. Once in a while I like to jump up and get it fast, and sometimes I like to take forever. Try a little of this and a little of that. I like to go slow for a while, and I like to go hard for a while. And you have to communicate somehow with your partner and find out what they're into. And where I figure that the lady is being nice to me, is doing it more for my pleasure than hers. I don't really try that hard to make it feel good, to where like I don't try to find a position where I can stimulate her clitoris at the same time I'm penetrating. If the lady is having fun, if she enjoys the process and isn't just being totally nice and she likes exploring, then there's all kinds of things you can do, positions you can get in to try to get some part of your body in contact with the clitoris at the same time that you're penetrating. Some ladies, it's nice sometimes to get in a position where you can use your hands so that you can manipulate the clitoris with your fingers or with a vibrator. Not usually the kind they sell in the doll stores. Some ladies are into those vibrating penis type vibrators, but people I know that like those like them as a secondary kind of a thing. They mainly like is the body massager from Sears and Roebuck. It's a little thing you hold in your hand about the size of an avocado or something. And it comes with several attachments. Gee, I know quite a few women that have them. They're great for women when they're alone, when they want to masturbate. I don't know of anything that works as well with guys, although I've tried those same kind of vibrators, and they're not bad. There are times when they feel good. It's never really done as much for me as it seems to do for most ladies. I think just because of the compactness of their sensory area or whatever, those kind of vibrators are just really the ultimate as far as a certain kind of orgasm is. You can't beat what you get with this kind of vibrator. And like, it's funny how some guys are jealous of vibrators. I mean, but what kind of sense does that make? If this machine can do a better job, can give this person a better experience than you can, what reason is there to feel jealous about that, or to say that you want to deprive the person of this kind of pleasure so that you can have the joy of giving them your lesser kind of stimulation, whatever it is that you can do to them? And it's kind of ridiculous. You should just be grateful for the help, after all. With ladies that do really prefer their vibrator to any other kind of clitoral stimulation, you can just kick back the ones that I know that I like to play with. We found a few positions where you can penetrate and fuck, and she can manipulate the vibrator at the same time. It's an interesting kind of sex in that the woman is usually in more of a fantasy world, and her awareness of me and what I'm doing is somewhat more limited than it would be if she didn't have the vibrator. There's a kind of an element of making love to an automaton in a way. I mean, this is a sort of a fantasy like a rubber doll. This is not all there is to it, but sort of like making love to a person who's really not there as far as you're concerned. That's something that's kind of hard for some guys to deal with. Well, how it is for me most of the time, if I'm with a beautiful lady, she's technically fairly competent, she can keep it pretty snug enough, then what I'm aware of when I'm making love to her is I'm not thinking about anything in my head as far as fantasies about being somewhere else or being with somebody else or having some sort of a symbolic reference for what's happening. I'm just feeling the sensation, getting the visual input and the tactile. Just thinking about that and feeling that is enough to get me off. But like, I have been in situations which, for one reason or another, the lady herself didn't make me that excited, and my mind would wander if I dwelt just on the current situation. To really enjoy the situation, I had to think about something else, and I'd imagine ladies that I had fantasies of making love. I would imagine that I was making love to them and that kind of thing. There are some women, and I'm sure there's some men, that never really get that heavily into the sensation itself. For them ever to get enough stimulation to have an orgasm, they've got to add the fantasy component. They have to be thinking of pictures in their mind that are exciting to them and stimulating to them. What is happening if they think only about the current situation? It's not enough to concentrate on somehow, or doesn't keep their attention somehow, or doesn't supply enough sensation some way. And the only way really they can get off is to be somewhere else in a way. Often you never know what the other person is thinking about, but the kind of relationships I usually have with people, and trying to follow this idea of making people feel comfortable with anything they happen to think. Girlfriends tell me about their fantasies, the things they think about, and like some of them, they're never really thinking about me at all when we're making love. They're thinking about the Indians getting raped in various situations, you name it. But the point is, they're not really there. Again, what can you do? Are you going to deny this person sexual gratification because they have to get it by adding a fantasy component? They have to be looking at a movie in their head? What can you say? Don't do that, stop doing that, think about me, pay attention to me, and don't get off as a result. How can anybody think they have the right to demand that of another person? So the thing to do in that situation, when you're with a person who gets off in their head more than in their body, the thing to do is don't distract them from their fantasies. Don't keep calling attention to yourself. sexual conversation is not really appreciated in the situation because it distracts her from her thoughts. The main thing I try to do is try to provide a nice background, really, for what's happening in her head, trying to give her some kind of a rhythmic response in tune with what's happening with her. But at the same time, it's sort of nice to know that you're not being monitored in a way that you can think or feel anything in this particular situation, and the person is really not going to be that sensitive to what's happening with you. There's a kind of an appeal in that. Maybe it's not what you want all the time, but it's fun a lot of the time. When you do find a lady that actually gets off on sexual intercourse, more than likely she's not going to be getting off on the thrusting in and out of the penis so much as the rubbing of the pubic bones together, or in some cases it is possible to get up high, and if the clitoris is down close to the opening of the vagina, you can get some stimulation actually with the shaft of the penis going in and out. But that's not often, and more often it seems that ladies that get off from the belly-to-belly contact, not the long strokes. If you are looking to find a way to get a lady off and fucking, you're probably going to have better luck keeping it in close instead of making these long strokes. It's hard for anybody to do two things at once and do them both well. It's hard for the guy to be thinking about what feels good to the girl and what's going to get her off, and to get into his own feelings at the same time and get himself off, and it works the other way too. It's hard for the girl to get into what feels good to her. She's trying to make it good for you. The same thing applies to things like going 69. It's fun. It's nice to be both eating on each other at the same time, but it's hard. If you get into what you're doing to her, it's almost like there's nothing even happening to you, and if you get to paying attention to what's happening to you, you wind up just not doing anything to her, just lying there. But it's kind of nice in a way to kind of fade in and fade out like that, to fade into yourself, fade into her. Back and forth is kind of fun. But if you're talking about getting down seriously and giving the ultimate head and giving the person the ultimate orgasm, that's hard to do, and think about something else at the same time. I'm thinking about this experiment I did with attention and consciousness and what you can pay attention to at once. I was driving across the Bay Bridge every day at the same time, in Stone, of course. And I would notice sometimes that I'd get to the other side of the Bay Bridge and I wouldn't remember nothing about going through the tunnel or anything. It would just all be a blank. I remember getting on the bridge, and the next thing I know, I'm getting off the bridge. I noticed this phenomenon and wondered what's happening in my head while this is going on. As I paid attention to this and that, I developed this little testing procedure. I found that, relating it to song lyrics, there's a kind of driving that you do when you're in a hurry and you want to get someplace and there's a lot of traffic and you're looking for the hole. You're looking for a place you can change lanes, go faster. You're looking to see who's coming up behind you, where the cops is. You're paying attention to all these things at once. And there's nothing else really in your head because it takes all your attention to compute all these trajectories and things and speeds to get yourself through the slot, to get where you're going fast. That's a situation where your attention is occupied by one thing and one thing only. It's kind of a thing that people try to strive for in meditation, and in real life happens once in a while on occasion. Okay, you're driving across the Bay Bridge and you're not really trying to get anywhere fast. You're just trying to get across the bridge, where I am. And I'm thinking of a song in my head. And I'm thinking of the words of the song, remembering them, and sort of singing the song in my head as I go across the bridge. And I find that without opening my mouth and making any sound, that I can sing the song in my head and still pay attention to traffic somewhat, still know where I am, still know if there's anybody moving up on me from behind, be somewhat cognizant of the situation, but I can't drive as aggressively. I can't think about the words of the song and look for holes in the traffic and try to weave back and forth and go fast. That level of awareness isn't possible to be able to do that and sing in my head at the same time. And then the next level is to actually sing the song out loud. You have to think of the words in your head and sing them out loud. In that case, there was even less attention left over to focus on the traffic. A lot of times, singing the song out loud would erase my consciousness of the traffic altogether, and I'd get across the bridge and find that I didn't have any recollection of getting there. Of course, singing a song isn't the only way of diverting your attention, and a lot of times I just get so caught up in the thought process itself, whatever it was I was thinking about, that I lose all conception of what's happening with the traffic. It's sort of as if you only have so many brain cells that are operating on the conscious level at the same time. You can divert a few of them from your main project to some other kind of activities, but you can't maintain the same level of attention anytime you're thinking about two things or trying to do two things at once. And the more complicated you make any one thing that you're thinking about, the less you have left over to think about anything else. Probably varies between people, but it definitely applies to sex. Maybe that's one reason simultaneous orgasms are so rare, is that it's hard for each person to be thinking about themselves and the other person enough to get everybody off at the same time. So what happens a lot of times is you take turns. I play with you for a while and you kick back, and then I kick back and you play with me for a while. That makes me think of this couple I was with one time. It's funny how people get into routines, especially couples. They find out a few things, what the other person likes, and they get into a routine that accommodates both people. And I was with this couple one night. I think more than anything else that this guy had a horny lady on his hands. She just couldn't get enough. Everybody has a night like that once in a while. He just needed help, that's all. But we wound up all three in the same room, and the routine went something like this. She would give me head, and he would watch, play with himself a little bit. Then she'd give him head, and I'd watch, kind of stroke her here and there. Then she'd give me head for a while, and then this would go back and forth. And she was good. She was really good at giving head. I'd get all excited when I'd be feeling good, and I'd be getting closer and closer to orgasm, and she'd break off, and she'd do him for a while. In the same way, when he was getting kind of close, she'd switch back to me. It sort of made it last a little longer. And then when she thought we were getting kind of close, we started switching off and fucking her, and I'd fuck her, and she'd give him head, and then we'd switch off. Then he'd give her head for a while, and I'd play with her, and everybody had a turn. It was great how it worked out, and I knew when it was time to switch. Making it last is a fairly common problem. It seems to be pretty typical that males, once they have an orgasm, pretty much lose interest, at least temporarily. Hey, they're thinking about having a cigarette or a sandwich or a beer or something. They pretty much lose interest. The way a lot of couples get around is with the guy getting off quick and then the lady being left unsatisfied. Or maybe she gets off once and she wants 2 or 3 times. He loses interest after the first one. And one way to get around this is to defer the male orgasm, so that by the time he gets around to having his one and only big one, she's had 2 or 3 or enough to make her satisfied. Funny, there's the joke. This old married couple that's standing around the park watching the ducks. And this one male duck goes into a frenzy and jumps up and fucks about 3 female ducks in a row. Just wham, bam, bam. I'm watching this, and the wife says, "Why can't you do that?" And the guy says, "Well, I could if I had a different duck every time." At the Sutro sometimes, I get into a kind of a frenzy myself. I fuck this one lady and I get off and we have a lot of fun. I really feel pretty satisfied, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll get it together and go home. We say goodnight. I get up and I'm wandering back to my room, or maybe I'm going to take a shower, and on the way I see this other box walking around. And all of a sudden my interest is rekindled. I take a shower and I'm ready for action again, just seeing that other duck there. It's sort of like the male is capable, but there's something about monogamy versus polygamy. It's harder to maintain attention, maybe, I don't know.